So, if you've ever been to a museum and gone to the gift shop, you've probably seen something like this. Or if you've been paying attention to paleo news for the past few years, you've probably seen headlines like these. Even now, as I'm making this video, there's currently a fossil up for auction. All of these represent elements of the fossil trade. Before we can get into the intricacies of the fossil trade, we need a bit of a history lesson on how it got like this. Starting with the first evidence of humans interacting with fossils, because we've been trading fossils for ages. The first evidence is from 400,000 years ago in England, where a hand axe was found with a fossil shell in it.
Okay, so I'm editing right now, and I made a little mistake in this part. The Westhoff's hand axe is actually 250,000 years old. I was thinking of a different hand axe from a different part of England that has a different fossil in it. That I'll show a picture of that one. That one is 400,000 years old. This one is 250,000. This one could have, the Westhoff's hand axe could have been Homo heidelbergensis, but it also could have been Neanderthals.
We do know that the owner of the hand axe didn't carve out the fossil intentionally to display it, but he might have picked the rock because of the fossil inside of it. The axe is actually so old it's attributed to Homo heidelbergensis. I actually found this line on its Wikipedia page that I feel fully encapsulates the chaos of human evolution. Homo heidelbergensis has been regarded as either the last common ancestor of modern humans, Neanderthals and Denisovans, or as a completely separate lineage. So which is it? Is it like our last common ancestor, or is it completely unrelated? We're then going to skip forward to the Mycenaean Greeks in the 1200s BCE. They saw fossils as religiously significant, and these fossils were most likely bought or given to the religious centers. Skipping ahead a little bit more to the 400s BCE, famous philosopher Xenophanes had found fossil shells and fish on land and deemed it evidence that Greece was once underwater, which is incredibly impressive that he was able to figure that out almost 3,000 years ago. Seriously, Greek philosophers were just on a completely different level. Historian Herodotus would also come to the same conclusion after observing fossils in Egypt. The last Greek guy we'll be talking about is Strabo. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but for some philosophers, they went by nicknames. Plato, for example, was a nickname given to him because he was absolutely jacked. Strabo was also probably a nickname as well, but not as cool as Plato. It means cross-eyed. Strabo also noticed marine fossils on land and in the limestone bricks in the pyramids. Shifting a bit more towards the actual topic of the video, starting around 300 BCE, countries in East Asia started seeing fossils as dragon bones, or longu, using them in medicines to treat things like vertigo, epilepsy, and even bone fractures. These treatments have been bought since then, and although the mining of fossils for this is illegal in most regions, the use of the fossils is still legal. This was also extremely common in medieval Europe, but there they saw them as the remains of giants or as evidence of the flood from the Bible. Towards the Renaissance, fossils weren't traded as medicine but as curiosities. Aristocratic collectors would purchase them and put them in their cabinet of curiosities or Kunstkammer, although they were still seen as coming from mythological creatures instead of some random squid from 400 million years ago. Like, they were just like, dude, look at this, I've got a unicorn horn in my house, isn't that sick? Towards the Napoleonic era, paleontology was established as a field, so most fossils were being sold to scientists instead of collectors. Mary Anning, who I talked about in this video, was the most famous person to do this, but efforts also existed in Germany. The main difference between the two was that Anning looked for fossils along the cliffside, while hunters in Germany found most in quarries.
I've been sleeping in a cardboard box, spending every dollar at the liquor shop. And even though I know I haven't got a lot, I'll try to give you love until the day you drop.
Towards the mid to late 20th century, two men would change paleontology forever. And not even in a good way. E.D. Cope and O.C. Marsh hated each other so much that they both went bankrupt and ruined paleontology for so many people. Their decade-long fight also increased interest in fossils in the United States and grew the fossil trade in the country. Around this time, selling fossils started to be established as a way to make money rather than just being sold to enthusiasts and scientists. Towards the early to mid-20th century, countries like the USA, Mongolia, Argentina, and Brazil started to create restrictions on amateur fossil hunting, although these were very minor. Starting in the 1950s, companies like Geological Enterprises started forming with the sole purpose of mining and selling fossils. These companies would often sell to scientific organizations and researchers, but would also sell to collectors and wealthy people. The dinosaur renaissance would also happen around this time, increasing scientific demand for fossils. Towards the late 20th century, countries like Mongolia and Brazil strictly prohibited fossil collection for personal gain, causing extremely lucrative black markets to form that often mishandle fossils. Then, Jurassic Park released, causing interest in dinosaurs and by proxy interest in fossils to explode, with the prices exploding alongside it. 4 years later, in 1997, the T-Rex Sue was put on auction. Sue is 90% complete, and if she was sold to a private collector, it would be disastrous. Fortunately, that didn't happen and was sold to the Field Museum for $8.4 million. Even if it wasn't sold to a private collector, it showed just how much money could be made by auctioning fossils.
Going once, going twice, every man here has a price. Over where, over there, sold to not a single lady in here.
Nowadays, the fossil trade is as strong as it's ever been. Commercial mining accounts for a huge majority of fossils mined, with only 11% of commercial fossils ever reaching museums. It's gotten so bad that some species have more specimens in private collections than in public ones. For example, there are 71 T-Rexes in private collections. 71. There are 10 less than that are publicly available. And you might think, well, we have a lot of some dinosaurs like T-Rex, so it's fine for some of these to be kept private. Which is a fair view, but some of these are extremely scientifically significant. Of those 71 T-Rexes, wait, what's the plural for T-Rex? Okay, just checked, and apparently there isn't one, so T-Rexes works. But of those 71 T-Rexes, 14 are juveniles, while there are only 4 in public collections, like 3 to 5. Specimens like Baby Bob could help our understanding of the species immensely, but because he's in a private collection and documentation on him is very poor, he's not really too helpful right now. Another thing is that upwards of 20 dinosaurs were auctioned in the past 5 years, with 2022 being extremely hot for fossils. In 2024, though, Apex the Stegosaurus was sold for $44.6 million, making it the most expensive fossil ever sold. All this did was increase the price for fossils all around, which can be incredibly harmful due to how many fake fossils are sold.
Graduated at the top, I like to take advantage of the bourgeoisie. So if you have a fantasy of being a queen, maybe you should borrow a couple books on me.
Despite my obviously negative tone, the fossil trade does do a ton of good. Like, don't view my opinion as the only objective way to look at it, because for the most part, it can be pretty nuanced. One thing it can help with is generating income for museums. Museums haven't been doing the best in recent years, so a lot have resorted to selling fossils to make money to support the museum. Another absolutely fantastic benefit of the fossil trade is that independent companies are able to excavate fossils that would have been left to erode. See, most professional digs can't really afford to excavate every single fossil, so many common ones are left there. I knew someone that told me that they found a hadrosaur leg bone and were told to just leave it there and that it wasn't worth the time and it would just erode. Another thing is that many fossils in private collections do eventually end up in public ones. However long it takes varies by a very wide margin, but it still happens. Another thing I don't see too many people talking about is how many species have been discovered through the fossil trade. Animals like Irritator, Ubirajara, and Halscaraptor would be completely unknown to science without the fossil trade. Well, unless Angurdurama is just Irritator, which, let's be honest, it probably is. But the other two are completely unique. Now, I should mention that Irritator and Ubirajara were mined and sold illegally, which is bad. If you learn one thing from this video, it should be don't do illegal stuff that fucks with the Brazilian government. Or just don't do illegal stuff in general. The fossil trade also allows for more fossils to be available to everyday people in schools, which could be great for education. For me personally, I learn so much better when I get to hold the object someone is talking about, which most museums, for good reason, don't let you do. Commercial excavation can also provide a lot of jobs for paleontologists, which is pretty great considering how competitive the field is. The companies also have a lot more leeway when it comes to funding, meaning they're able to explore more remote areas and are able to be at sites for longer periods of time, meaning they don't have to leave as much material behind. Also, since the fossil market can be so lucrative, it can provide a steady source of income for some impoverished people in countries like Morocco.
Going once, going twice, won't these gentlemen suffice? Any here, any there, any motions anywhere.
Okay, now you might be thinking, maybe the fossil trade isn't too bad. Yeah, your mindset's about to change pretty quickly. First, Because of all the high-profile sales, some landowners are becoming reluctant to sell to scientists, as collectors have more funds available at their disposal. It also doesn't help that many fossils sold from South America and East Asia are done so illegally, leading to improper care of the fossils and heavy damage often occurring, which can be incredibly annoying considering how many animals are discovered through the fossil trade and how many valuable specimens are currently in private collections. The companies that mine for the fossils often have large-scale operations going on, which can lead to erosion and deforestation, which is awful, especially considering the regions these fossils are found in are already experiencing both of these issues. Amateurs will also try and excavate fossils themselves. The recklessness of these fossil poachers can lead to damage done to the fossils that could be important and are also damaging the environment the fossil was found in. Another extreme downside of the fossil trade, as stated previously, is how many scientifically significant fossils are kept away from scientists and are poorly documented due to this. I feel like the fossil market would be better if they had supervision from professional teams, but because they don't, these incredibly rare finds are constantly sold off. And you know how I mentioned most fossils are made easier to access due to it? Yeah, the reason why it isn't all is because the fossil market is growing so quickly that it's actually just keeping fossils out of the public's hands and giving them to rich people. All of this has been pretty bad, but these next two are what made me think the entire industry needs extreme change. Parts of fossils are often neglected or destroyed in order to better preserve parts like teeth, claws, and skulls, as they make the most money. And finally, the worst for last. Sorry, my camera fell over. Finally, the worst for last. In some regions of countries like Myanmar, slave labor is often used for fossil mining, and in countries like Mexico and Brazil, criminal gangs are used to smuggle fossils across the border. Fucking slave labor, dude. I've seen so many people defend the industry, but I personally feel like the slave labor just crosses the line. Granted, both of these are extremely limited, but still, please do your research when buying fossils so that you're not accidentally supporting things like this.
So many ladies who want to be mates, and the prospects are good, but the dates never great. Over here, over there, over where, anywhere. They're too busy with winning the bidding to care and get sold.
Now, this category is about fake fossils and things to look out for, along with things directly caused by the fossil trade. The most famous example of fossil modification is that of irritators. Irritator's skull had plaster and car filler added to it to extend the snout and make it look more complete so it could be more valuable. The funny thing is, the skull of Irritator is the most complete Spinosaurid skull. Archaeoraptor is another famous example of a fossil modified for financial gain. It was created by combining parts of Microraptor, my beloved, some prehistoric birds, and some other bullshit for good measure. It was marketed as a missing link between birds and dinosaurs to raise its value even more before it was proved to be faked. I actually learned about this one while researching for the video, and it's a relatively modern example, being Tridentinosaurus. Tridentinosaurus was a real reptile from the Permian, and its specimen was thought to have preserved soft tissue since 1931. However, in 2024, they used techniques like UV photography and other stuff to reveal that the soft tissue was painted onto the rock with carbon paint. This one was also most likely faked to make a quick buck. If you want to learn more about how they figured out the soft tissue was fake, there's a link in the description. The next fraud is Mongolarachne chiangensis. This was a proposed larger species of Mongolarachne, which is a big spider from Mongolia. No duh. In reality, it was a crayfish with painted-on legs. It was also faked for commercial reasons. You should be noticing that all of these fakes were made primarily for monetary gain and not for notoriety. Santanachelis is a type of sea turtle found in Brazil. Its second specimen was revealed to be faked by combining actual Santanachelis material, Aroripa mice material, which is another type of turtle, and, just random bits of dirt with all of it being held together by car filler. And say it with me now, this one was also faked for monetary gain. Chychosaurus is a commonly sold souvenir fossil, but they're commonly altered to be more desirable. They often have carved bones made out of concrete, are compiled with other animals, and have parts made entirely out of resin, all to make the animal look more complete so that they're worth more. After this section, I'll talk about how to spot fakes and look for ethical sellers, so don't worry. These next three are a lot older, but are super funny, so I just had to talk about them. Hydrarchos was from 1845 and was claimed to be Leviathan from the Bible. Yeah, it was a composite of like 20 Basilosaurus skeletons, resulting in a 114-foot sea serpent. It was created as a traveling novelty exhibit similar to what P.T. Barnum was doing. Unfortunately, it was likely destroyed in the 1871 Chicago fire. Next was the Cardiff Giant. It was a 10-foot petrified humanoid found in New York in 1869. O.C. Marsh went out to investigate it and, yeah, no, it was just carved out of gypsum. It kind of reminds me of those fake aliens made out of llama bones and stuff. The intent behind it is actually super funny, and for once wasn't entirely because of money. The guy that carved it, George Hull, was an atheist and heard an argument about how giants were real because they were in the Bible. So George created a giant to show how willing people are to affirm their beliefs at any chance they get, while also making some money off of them. Now, personally, I think buying and owning fossils is totally fine. I own many fossils myself, although none of them are bought. What I have a problem with is when the commercialization of fossils makes it more difficult for people to buy them and interferes with science. So you might be wondering, how do I make sure my fossils are real and ethical? To make sure a fossil you're looking to purchase is real, look for consistent texture in the rock and inconsistencies in colors. Real fossils don't really have the same color across the entire fossil, and different parts will have different grain. Fakes will often be really dark and won't match the surrounding rock. Another tell is if the fossil looks too symmetrical, like a one-to-one mirror on both sides. If any one of these is off, there's a chance the fossil you're looking at is carved. Also, if you're thinking, hey, this fossil looks like it was made of concrete, there's a high chance it might be. The main way you can tell if a fossil is painted is by dipping a cotton swab in acetone and rubbing it on the fossil. Although this isn't the most practical and should be a last resort, as it could damage fossils as well. You can also tell if something is painted on if it's very shiny compared to the surrounding rock and if it fills cracks with the same color as the rest of the fossil. However, most of these are generalizations and there are always exceptions to the rules. You can make sure your fossil is sourced ethically by checking the country of origin. If it comes from countries like Mongolia and Brazil, there's a high chance that it's exported illegally. If it comes from Peru or China, there's a sort of chance that it was exported illegally, so check with the seller to make sure they sourced it legitimately. Try making sure the fossil you're purchasing comes from the seller's own land and wasn't taken from someplace like a national park. Making sure it was from the seller's own land is a really good way to make sure that it's sourced ethically. Avoid fossils from Myanmar at all costs. Myanmar famously sells tons of amber, but as stated previously, the amber is commonly mined using forced labor. If you're looking for amber, there are plenty of other places to get it from. I would also avoid large-scale fossil dealers online, like Ancient Artifacts, as they source their fossils from really unethical places and violate scientific ethic codes with most of the things they sell. Another good tip is to avoid any seller that hesitates to provide locality. This could be a sign that the fossil is unethically sourced, and just know it's totally fine to just buy a replica instead of real deal. Like, I've got this Velociraptor skeleton replica because it'd be extremely unethical to buy an actual Velociraptor skeleton. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. This took way more time than I thought it would, but that's what I get for trying to cover a nuanced topic. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and hopefully you learned something about the paleontology industry as a whole. I also wanted to announce that I have a TikTok and Instagram now. I'm planning on posting video updates on Instagram, and I might make unique content for TikTok, but that depends. Links will be in the description. Have a good one. Bye.